Listener discretion is advised. This episode features the true account of a serial killer. For those of you who may be triggered by disturbing topics, please skip this episode. Beneath the quiet soil of rural North Dakota, 6 bodies lay hidden. No one reported them missing. No one came looking. They remained buried, silent, and forgotten until a man named Eugene Butler was removed from the home where they were entombed. And that's when the truth about Niagara began to surface, one shovel of dirt at a time. I'm your host, Dan David. Welcome to City of Nightmares. Located in Grand Forks County, just west of the Red River Valley, Niagara, North Dakota is a quiet farming town that's never made much noise. Its population has hovered in the double digits for years, and even during its early 20th century peak, Niagara was home to little more than a few hundred settlers. Established in the 1880s during the expansion of the Great Northern Railway, the town took its name from the surrounding Niagara Township, not the famous waterfall. It's rural, unassuming, and about as off the radar as a place can get. It's the kind of town where the horizon seems endless and the silences stretch longer than the winters. Niagara's landscape is stitched together by wheat fields, gravel roads, and the occasional grain elevator. It's rural America in its purest form, where people tend to their land, mind their business, and expect others to do the same. In places like this, a person can go unnoticed for a very long time, which is precisely what made Eugene Butler so dangerous. He was known to locals as odd, but not threatening, quiet, but not necessarily malicious. And when he was finally removed from the town, people thought the matter was closed, that his eccentricity had peaked with insanity and ended with his death. But 2 years later, the town would learn how badly they'd underestimated the man. Because beneath the floorboards of his home, buried in layers of dirt and secrecy, were the remains of 6 men, each one bludgeoned, hidden, and forgotten. Eugene Butler moved to Niagara in the late 1800s, inheriting a large property and a modest fortune from his family. He never married, never had children, and lived entirely alone in a 2-story farmhouse on the edge of town. To outsiders, he might have seemed like just another solitary farmer, but those who lived nearby knew better. He was reclusive, strange even by frontier standards. Neighbors reported seeing him ride his horse wildly through the night, yelling at people who weren't there. He was prone to sudden rages, believed others were spying on him, and was increasingly consumed by paranoia. According to a 1906 article in the Grand Forks Herald, Butler had developed a, quote, fixed delusion that he was being persecuted, and had become a threat to himself and others. That same year, Butler was declared legally insane and committed to the North Dakota State Hospital in Jamestown, a massive brick complex that housed the mentally ill, the criminally insane, and those the state simply didn't know what else to do with. By 1907, Butler was a full-time resident of the asylum. He died there in 1913. There was no funeral, no obituary. just a simple record noting his cause of death: general paresis, a term used then to describe late-stage syphilitic insanity. 2 years after his death, in 1915, a crew arrived to renovate the long-abandoned Butler house. They began excavating the basement floor, which was still packed with dense layers of soil. That's when they found the first body, and then another, and another. By the time they were finished, 6 full skeletons had been recovered from the crawlspace beneath Butler's home. All 6 victims were male. All had suffered blunt force trauma to the skull. They were buried in separate graves, some wrapped in old cloth, others simply laid to rest beneath the soil. There were no identifying documents, no clothing, and no personal items. And most disturbing of all, no one had ever reported them missing. At the time, Niagara's police force was minimal, and the North Dakota Bureau of Criminal Investigation didn't yet exist. Law enforcement could only speculate. The leading theory was that Butler had hired seasonal farmhands, migrant workers who came and went during planting and harvest season, and murdered them in fits of delusion. Because these men were transient, often without close ties, their disappearances went unnoticed. A local farmer, Charles Eugene, told the Fargo Forum in 1915, "There were always strangers coming through. Sometimes they'd stay a week, sometimes a day. You never asked too many questions." Historian Sue Legatt, who documented the case in a Grand Forks County Historical Survey, notes that Butler was likely never suspected of violence simply because people viewed mental illness then as a social inconvenience, not a danger. "In those days, if someone was off, you gave them space," she wrote. "That's what people did with Eugene Butler." Records show no formal charges were ever filed against Butler posthumously. Without witnesses, identities, or hard forensic evidence, there was no way to officially connect him to the deaths, despite the fact they were found directly under his home. The remains were eventually buried in a nearby cemetery. To this day, none of the 6 men have been identified. As for the house, it didn't last long. Locals tore it down shortly after the discovery. Some said it was for safety reasons. Others say it was because no one wanted to live where the murders had taken place. The lot sat vacant for decades, slowly swallowed by weeds and time. Today, Niagara is smaller than ever, its population hovering around 40. The town remains quiet, unassuming. You could drive through it in a matter of minutes and never guess it once held a secret so grim it still raises eyebrows more than a century later. There's no plaque to mark the Butler property, no historical marker. But for those who know the story, it's impossible to forget. 6 men, likely desperate for work, perhaps hungry, alone, and trusting, walked into Eugene Butler's home. Sadly, none of them ever walked back out. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode of City of Nightmares, be sure to follow the show for more. New episodes premiere every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Next time, we're heading east to the Chesapeake Bay, where something massive is set to stir beneath the surface. Some call it a sea monster. Others say it's nothing but a log. But a growing number of witnesses claim there's something out there, and it isn't staying hidden for much longer. Until then, I'm your host, Dan David, reminding you all to stay safe out there. I'll be seeing you in the next episode.
Nope.